Well, there you have it. We got the splicing of the new taillight section complete. And now I use my meter, my multimeter, just to double check, make sure I've got continuity through all the wires. And then after that we're going to move on to replacing all of these female ends, in general cleaning up, and eventually we'll get to rewrapping where necessary the harness with fresh wrap. That'll all be subjects of a future series. We're going to now continue on with the repair of the wiring harness for the little Yamaha YL1. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with replacing these old ends, connectors like you can see here, from one end of the harness to the other, and then I'll come back and clean each of the wires with acetone, get that done, and then we'll rewrap as appropriate the harness, the balance of the harness. So let's talk about these connectors a little bit. Clearly, and this is the, what I'm showing right now is the tail light end of the harness. It's the one I just completed the splicing job, you can see right there. And so we're going to start this end for no particular reason. But the connectors, I do have a connector repair kit which has OEM style hardware and plugs and all different combinations of the various fittings that you would find on vintage Japanese motorcycles. I have actually more than this. This is the original kit I bought quite a few years ago, probably 15 years ago now, and I have even more than this. And then of course this is the crimper tool, the ratcheting crimper tool, which is used to crimp the fittings, and these are fairly commonly available as well. And you can see the wire size nomenclature is stamped right into the jaws of the unit. Anyway, going back to the connectors, you'll notice that the original harness, the one in my hand, has a little bit different style. These are a little shorter. The original are a little shorter. And let me get a little better view for you here. And they're more squared off. They don't have this tail, like you can see right here, on the molded into the boot that goes over the outside of the connector itself. I believe, this is just supposition on my part, these this style, which I encounter from time to time, not often, I more often encounter this style on Japanese harnesses, but I believe these are made by two different companies. I believe that the OEMs sourced various components from different suppliers in Japan, and I suspect that this style was common to one manufacturer. I don't know who that might be. And this style is common to other manufacturers, more than one, I don't know. But I think these are two different manufacturers originally. It doesn't really make any difference for our purposes. This style will work just fine for this harness. And in fact, that's what I'm going to use because that's what I've got. These bare ends right here are what go into the switch, the brake light switch that mounts to the swing arm. So these are intended to be bare. They have been tinned with solder from the factory, and eventually that will get cleaned up. But for right now, that's not our focus. Before we proceed any further, I want to give a little shout out to Del Gunlatch at Vintage Connections, right there, in California, USA, who is one of the suppliers. I think there's multiples now that supply these type of kits. But I've been dealing with Dell for, again, probably 15 years, and I bought replacement items. You can buy these. You don't have to buy the whole kit like I did originally. You can buy replacement items and components. But Dell is it's a mom and pop shop, and he's very responsive, so I want to give him a shout out. Great guy to do business with. Anyway, when I'm replacing connectors, what I do is I cut off, I just use a side cutter like this, a good sharp side cutter, and I will cut this as tightly to the connector as I can because I'm trying to preserve as much of the original length as possible. And from there, it's a pretty straightforward process once you understand it. We'll cut this off, we'll strip back about 3/8. It does provide instructions on how to go about using his kits, but again, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead now and demonstrate the process that I use. I'll do these 4, and then I'm going to work my way on to the other parts of the harness. I'm not necessarily going to show each and every one of them because once you've seen it once or twice, you'll get the gist of what's involved. As I'm going to be working on the taillight end, I have 4 female connectors, and obviously female for obvious reasons. I have counted out 4 of the actual connectors themselves. These are what will fit inside of this eventually and provide the actual connections in the wire circuit. You can get these connectors in both brass, which you see here, as well as what they call tinned, like that. I have used both over the years. I've never really seen any difference in performance for my purposes. I had 2 of the tinned ones left, so I'm just going to go ahead and use those up. Everything else I have for female ends, single ends like this, are in brass. But again, don't worry about the details on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a yellow wire, simply because it's the longest of the 4. And I'm going to take my side cutters right here. Those are good and sharp. They're not very old. And I'm simply going to cut that off as high up here as I can, like that. This will be thrown away. Then I'm going to use a good wire stripper, and I'm going to strip this back about 3/8 of an inch or so. I think that's what Dell calls for in his instructions too. Again, I think this is probably 16 gauge wire. So I'm just going to strip this back a little bit. I tend to be conservative. I don't want to overcut it and damage the wires themselves. And then I'll just simply twist that, like you see there. Straighten it out a little bit. Now I'm going to clean this end of the wire. I have to slip this boot on, and I want the wire clean right there, so I'm just going to slip on a glove here real quick. You can do this all ahead of time too if you want. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes right now. If you want to clip them all and then clean them all at the same time, you certainly can feel free. I'm going to use a little acetone right here. You can see acetone, and I'm just going to clean the end of this wire off so it's clean underneath the boot. Do the whole thing if you want at the same time, like that. Order of operations on something like this is not critical, as long as you don't forget certain key steps, such as forgetting to put the boot on before you crimp on the end. Then you have a problem, because in some cases you can slip the boot on over the connector. Some cases you can't. You have to remove it, put the boot on, and then do it all over again. And I have done that by mistake in the past. So I've got the wire clean. Don't forget to slip on the vinyl boot like this, because this will slide down and over the connection once it's on. Using one of the female connectors, what I do is, you can see these little ears. You've got longer ears on the left end, in this case, of the connector. You've got little shorter ones here in the middle. The longer ears, I just press those in with my fingers just a little bit, like that. You can use a pair of needle nose pliers or something like that as well. What I'll then do, or what I do, is I take my ratcheting crimpers and I fit this right into the jaws of the crimper like that. See if you can see that. With the split where the connector was formed, generally facing to the top. I get that aligned just right, like that. You can see how I've got that, I think, mounted in the jaws. Now that I've got the connector oriented in the crimping tool, I'm going to take the wire, making sure the end is twisted nice and tight into the wire like that. I'm going to take this and insert the bare wire into the opening in the end of the fitting connector, and I'm going to go in about a quarter of an inch or so, maybe not quite a quarter of an inch. I want that insulation underneath that first set of ears is really what I'm after here. It's going to go in about like that, and then you simply crimp all the way down and then release the jaws. And there you can see it's crimped. Right here you can, I think, see where the ears are folded over the insulation, and the shorter ears are folded over the wire, which is what you want to make a good tight connection. Then it's simply a matter of slipping this down over the connector and working it down like that. Now there's a couple of ribs here, right where my thumb is. There's a relief section right there that slides up over that first set of crimped ears, a larger set of crimped ears, and that's where you want that boot to slide over to, like that. So that wire is done. Now if you want, you can check continuity between this end and the other end of the yellow, but I'm very confident that's okay. So we've got that first connector complete. That's really all there is to it. It goes much quicker in practice than it does what I just demonstrated you, because I had to talk you through it a bit. So now I'm just going to go ahead and complete these other three at this end of the harness. I'm going to remove all three of these. Since they're all female, it doesn't make any difference. They've all got to get done. Now I'm going to clean each one of them with acetone. I always wear gloves when I'm handling chemicals. I handle so many chemicals that I just want to make sure that since many of these are cumulative in your system, that I don't pay the price someday in my old age for having handled so many chemicals. I can come back and clean this again later if I want to. Right now I'm primarily concerned with the end here where that boot is going to sit. Don't forget your boot. If you want, you can put a little dielectric grease over this part of the fitting. It'll make that a little easier to slide that boot up over the connector. A little dielectric grease. You'll hear it normally snap when you've got that indentation I talked about in the boot right there up over that first set of ears on your fitting. Now in this case, since the boot doesn't have enough room because of the way the harness is wrapped to slide up out of the way, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to slit this wrap. I'm probably going to end up, or I will end up replacing it anyway, so I'm just going to slit this wrap back a bit with a sharp knife. And so I can get the clearance that I need. You can see where they had, when it was made, they'd wrapped it with electrical tape underneath. You can see that I have peeled the wrap and the gray wiring electrical tape back just far enough so that I can get the boot on. I'm not going to remove it completely because I'm going to use that as a marker of if I have to use electrical tape on the inside and I rewrap this section, I have an idea of how far they actually went with it originally. So now I'm just going to clean this dark brown wire a bit with acetone, and then we'll go ahead and finish this last of the 4 joints. Well, there we have the 4 connectors replaced on the taillight end of the bike. Again, I'll go back over and clean these a little bit more. I was more concerned with the ends here where the boots fit. I'll clean those in a little bit more thoroughly with acetone when I prepare to rewrap, which I'm sure I will end up doing eventually. So now I'm going to move on to the rest of the harness and do the same thing. Now these male ends right here, I'm not going to replace, even though I have those in the kit. There's really no need to. They're not damaged, they're clean. I might wire brush them a little bit. Certainly will clean the wires, but there's really no reason to replace those male ends. The same with this plastic 3 connector plug. There's really nothing wrong with that. I'll clean it, but there's really nothing wrong with that either. A neutral switch connection, again, same thing. It's intact, a little tarnished. I'll wire brush it, and it'll be fine. Connectors for the stator, again, same thing. These wires right here, I think they go to the coils. I'll clean those up, wire brush them, leave those alone. That'll bring us down to the opposite end of the harness, which is the section that goes up into the headlight shell, I believe, and these will all be replaced, obviously. I'm not sure about this male one. I might or might not replace this one. It's got some corrosion going on there. I think you can see that green. And this green wire right here, I think that was green originally. I'm not sure what end this takes. I'm guessing it takes a female, but I'll check the other harness, the spare harness, to see what kind of connection it has here, as well as look at the wiring diagram to try to determine what kind of connector that takes. If in doubt, I could leave that off till the harness is mounted on the bike, and then seeing how the wiring comes together, and at that point determine what kind of end it should have also. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and replace all of these. I'm not going to show all of that on video because it's just repetition of what you've just seen. The double connectors here, you can see there, there's no difference in that one, and they are in my kit, than the ones you have just seen. This is more of the style I have in the kit right here. But the process is exactly the same. I think that'll be it for this video. I'm going to go ahead and replace these ends, and we'll bring you back as we're moving on to the next step, which will probably be rewrapping, retaping and rewrapping the harness. That's it for now. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me comments. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.